The room buzzed with quiet urgency as holographic displays flickered before Commander Vance's eyes. Earth's top military strategist stood still, his hands clasped behind his back, face impassive as he studied the incoming threat. The Galactic Council's fleet, a mass of starships stretching across the void, was mere hours away. Their arrogance showed in the lack of subterfuge. No cloaking, no advanced maneuvers, just brute force aimed at Earth. They don't know what's waiting for them, Vance muttered under his breath, a hint of amusement tugging at his lips. From his side, Lieutenant Arya Collins glanced up at him, her brow furrowed. "Are you sure we're ready for this, Commander?" Her voice was low, but there was an edge to it. Arya was never one to mince words, and beneath her bravado lay the same tension that gripped every officer in the room. Vance didn't answer immediately. He let the question hang, watching the slow approach of the alien fleet on the tactical display. Thousands of ships, each one armed to the teeth, marched through the darkness of space like a force of nature. It would have been terrifying, if not for one thing. "We're ready," he finally said, his voice calm, deliberate. "They expect a slaughter. What they'll get is a lesson." Arya raised an eyebrow, skepticism flashing across her face. "A lesson? Commander, I don't think they're here for philosophy." A chuckle escaped Vance. "No, but they will learn one. Mark my words." Outside, the planet's defenses were quietly activating. Massive shield generators hummed to life, casting invisible barriers around key strategic points. Deep beneath the surface, long-buried rail guns and plasma turrets warmed up, their targeting systems locking onto the incoming fleet. Humanity had spent decades preparing for this moment. The alien armada might have the numbers, but Earth had something far more potent: strategy. The display zoomed in on one of the lead ships, a gargantuan warship bristling with weapons. Arya's lips pressed into a thin line. That flagship alone could level entire continents. What if? "We don't deal in what-ifs, Lieutenant," Vance cut in, his tone sharpening. "This isn't the first time they've tried to put us in our place. It's just the first time they've done it so publicly." His gaze shifted to her, steel in his eyes. "They've underestimated us for the last time." Arya opened her mouth to respond, but was interrupted by a sharp alarm that sliced through the room. The fleet had crossed into Earth's outer defense perimeter. The countdown had begun. "All stations report," Vance ordered, his voice steady, though the tension in the air thickened. A flurry of reports came in from across the room. Engineers confirmed the shields were holding. Weapons officers reported that their systems were locked and primed. The entire defense network hummed with readiness. "Their arrogance is our advantage," Vance said, more to himself than to anyone else. His mind worked furiously, calculating the steps of the coming battle like a chess game. "They think we're weak, primitive. But that's because they've never seen humans fight when we've got our backs against the wall." Arya exhaled slowly, her initial doubts fading. There was something about the way Vance operated, how every move seemed calculated, every decision part of a larger strategy. She trusted him, more than she'd ever trusted any commander. "They'll regret coming here," she said softly. "They already do," Vance replied, eyes fixed on the display as the first of the alien ships entered the trap. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Let the lesson begin." The alien fleet glided ominously into Earth's outer defenses, a wall of sleek warships moving with unshakable precision. To the untrained eye, it looked like the end. But Commander Vance knew better. Every inch of space had been meticulously calculated, every weapon calibrated to perfection. Still, tension rippled through the control room as the countdown to engagement continued. "Range?" Vance's voice was calm, betraying none of the weight of the moment. 500 kilometers and closing," one of the junior officers replied, his hands trembling slightly over the control panel. The room was silent except for the low hum of equipment and the tapping of fingers on glass. Lieutenant Arya Collins, now standing beside Vance at the central console, leaned in closer to the display. The alien ships, sleek, dark, and bristling with unfamiliar weapons, were drawing closer. Her jaw tightened. They're going to target the satellites first, she murmured. Cut off our communications, blind us. That's their play. Vance nodded. Let them try. With a flick of his wrist, he brought up a secondary holographic display showing the planet's defense grid. The satellites were already repositioning, shifting subtly in their orbits. They weren't just communication relays. They were part of Earth's counteroffensive, a hidden layer of defense the Galactic Council had no idea about. Order the interceptors to hold position, Vance commanded. Let them think they've got the upper hand. Aria's gaze flickered with understanding. She keyed in the orders, her fingers moving with sharp precision. Despite her earlier doubts, she now felt the surge of confidence that came with the commander's unshakable resolve. Seconds ticked by. The enemy fleet had moved within firing range, yet they hesitated, no doubt scanning for Earth's hidden defenses. Their ships slowed slightly, as though waiting for some unseen signal to strike. Hold! Vance's voice was a low murmur. Every officer in the room was on edge, waiting for the moment when all hell would break loose. Then, without warning, the lead ship opened fire, a bright, searing pulse of energy that streaked through the void, headed straight for Earth's orbital satellites. Now! Vance barked. Instantly, Earth's defense grid roared to life. The satellites unleashed their hidden payloads, and dozens of plasma projectiles erupted toward the alien fleet. The first wave of alien fire was intercepted mid-flight, exploding harmlessly in space as Earth's railguns and turrets joined the fray. The control room erupted into motion. Officers shouted updates and coordinated attacks as the tactical displays lit up with the chaotic dance of battle. The alien ships, taken off guard by the sudden ferocity of Earth's counterattack, scrambled to adjust their formation. Direct hit on the enemy's flanking ships, one of the tactical officers shouted. We've knocked out their left wing. A grim smile tugged at the corners of Aria's mouth. They didn't expect this, she muttered. Vance's gaze never left the display. His mind worked like a machine, calculating the next steps with cold precision. They're going to regroup and push straight through the center. Standard brute force tactic. Aria nodded, already thinking ahead. We should launch the interceptors. Full assault. Vance cut her off, his voice clipped. Hit them before they can adjust. Aria relayed the command, and within moments, Earth's interceptors, sleek, agile fighters designed for rapid deployment, rushed out of the planet's defense zones like a swarm of angry hornets. They streaked toward the enemy fleet, weaving through bursts of alien fire as they targeted the weak spots in the ship's shields. The control room lights flickered for a second as the main grid rerouted power to the weapons systems. Sweat beaded on Aria's forehead, but she forced herself to stay focused. Every decision mattered, and there was no room for hesitation. We've got their flagship in sight, an officer reported. Their shields are holding, but they're weakening. Focus all fire on the flagship, Vance ordered. Break their chain of command. The room buzzed with controlled chaos as commands were issued and tactical decisions made. The tension was palpable, but beneath it, there was an undercurrent of grim determination. Earth had been underestimated for far too long. Suddenly, a warning light flared on the central console. Commander, we've got a problem, Aria said, her voice tight. They're charging a superweapon. If they get it off, they'll cripple our defenses in one shot. Vance's jaw clenched, eyes narrowing at the display. Time to impact? 2 minutes, came the reply. Prepare countermeasures, Vance said, his mind racing. He had anticipated something like this, but the speed at which the alien fleet had adapted was impressive. Still, there was one move they hadn't accounted for. Commander, what are you thinking? Aria asked, sensing the shift in his demeanor. Vance didn't answer immediately. His eyes were locked on the flagship's glowing core, where the energy buildup was visible even on the tactical display. We're going to push them, Vance said finally, his voice hard as steel. Take the interceptors and drive straight through their formation. We'll force them to redirect power to their shields. Aria's eyes widened. You're risking everything on a frontal assault? I'm betting they won't see it coming, Vance replied. The countdown to disaster continued. The control room was suffused with a sharp tension that cut through the air like a blade. Commander Vance stood rigid, his eyes locked onto the holographic display as the alien flagship's weapon continued to charge. Its core pulsed with a malevolent energy that threatened to rip through Earth's defenses with a single devastating blast. Time was running out. "Interceptors are ready for the frontal assault, Commander," Lieutenant Aria Collins reported, her fingers trembling over the console. She barely masked the fear in her voice, but the flicker of determination in her eyes told Vance all he needed to know: she was in this for the long haul. "Good. Now we move." Vance's voice, steady as ever, belied the enormity of what he was about to do. On the tactical display, the swarm of Earth's interceptors shot forward like silver darts, breaking formation to barrel straight toward the heart of the alien fleet. It was a suicidal maneuver by most standards. An overwhelming force of alien ships stood between them and the flagship. But Vance had calculated every possible outcome. They couldn't afford to hesitate. "Full throttle," Vance ordered, his gaze narrowing as he watched the incoming wave of alien fighters mobilize to meet them head-on. "Make them react." Aria keyed in the command. "All interceptors, full speed ahead. Stick to the central corridor." Within moments, the interceptors accelerated, leaving streaks of light as they closed the distance between the alien blockade and the flagship. The enemy, sensing the boldness of the move, scrambled to adjust. Their ships, caught off guard by the sheer audacity of the maneuver, repositioned to intercept the attack. "They're diverting power to their shields," Aria shouted, surprise coloring her voice. "It's working." Vance's jaw tightened. "They don't have a choice. They know if we hit them now, their weapon won't be ready in time." The alien fleet's response was swift. Streams of plasma fire erupted from their ships, crisscrossing the void with deadly intent. Earth's interceptors danced through the chaos, weaving in and out of the barrage. Explosions lit the blackness of space as a few interceptors were hit, spiraling into oblivion. But the bulk of the fleet pressed on, driving straight into the heart of the alien formation. "Focus fire on their forward shields," Vance commanded. "Break their defense." As the interceptors closed the gap, their railguns and plasma cannons unleashed a devastating volley. The alien shields shimmered under the impact, their glow flickering as they absorbed the punishing barrage. Vance could see the cracks forming. "Shields are weakening," Aria said, her voice taut with urgency. "But so are ours. The fleet's taken heavy fire. We only need a breach," Vance replied, his eyes hard as he watched the flagship's energy core pulse dangerously close to full charge. "If we can punch through, they'll have to pull back power to stabilize." Suddenly, the flagship's main weapon glowed brighter. A new alarm blared across the control room, the sound sharp and piercing. "They're preparing to fire!" an officer yelled, panic lacing his words. "Impact in 30 seconds!" The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Vance. This was the moment that would decide everything. Vance's mind raced, calculating the final steps. The flagship was still vulnerable, its shields faltering but not yet broken. If they didn't strike now, it would be too late. "Send the signal," Vance ordered, his voice low but commanding. Aria's fingers flew over the console, sending a rapid burst transmission to the interceptor squadron. In an instant, the interceptors shifted tactics. Instead of dispersing, they converged into a tight formation, heading straight for the weak point in the alien flagship's shields. "They're concentrating everything on one point," Aria whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. "It's all or nothing." The interceptors roared forward, their weapons firing in a relentless stream. The alien fleet retaliated with ferocity, their plasma bolts tearing through space, but the human pilots didn't waver. They charged straight into the storm. Seconds ticked by in agonizing slow motion. Then it happened. The alien flagship's shields buckled under the concentrated assault. A jagged opening appeared, a crack in the impenetrable armor that had held back humanity's finest. "They've broken through!" Aria shouted, her voice alive with triumph. Vance's face remained stoic, though a glint of satisfaction flickered in his eyes. Fire everything we've got at that core. Now. The control room exploded into motion. Officers relayed orders, and Earth's remaining defensive systems locked onto the exposed core of the alien flagship. Railguns, plasma cannons, and missile systems all zeroed in on the breach. A volley of Earth's mightiest weapons streaked through space, slamming into the alien flagship's exposed core. For a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. Then, a brilliant flash of light erupted from the center of the alien ship. The control room's displays went white as the core destabilized, unleashing a violent chain reaction. The shockwave rippled through space, tearing the alien flagship apart in a blinding explosion that sent debris hurtling in all directions. The silence that followed was deafening. "They're retreating," Arya said softly, her voice trembling with disbelief. "The rest of the fleet, they're falling back." Vance finally exhaled, his shoulders relaxing ever so slightly. "They've lost their leader. They won't risk another engagement without regrouping." The control room was still buzzing with activity, but a quiet sense of victory hung in the air. Earth had done the impossible, stood against a superior alien force and held the line. But Vance knew it wasn't over. This was just the beginning. "Prepare for their return," he said, his voice firm as ever. "They'll be back, and next time, they'll come with everything they've got." The aftermath of the alien flagship's destruction left the Earth fleet suspended in a fleeting silence. For a moment, the stars seemed to blink out as the debris of their once dominating adversary drifted through the void. But Commander Vance knew this was no time for celebration. Victory, as decisive as it had seemed, had only bought them a reprieve, a brief one at that. "Report," Vance ordered, his tone crisp as he turned to Lieutenant Arya Collins. His mind was already spinning, anticipating the next moves of the alien forces. The first battle was over, but the war had just begun. "Damage to our fleet is substantial, Commander. We've lost nearly 30% of our interceptors, and multiple cruisers have sustained heavy damage," Arya replied, her fingers flying over the console as she relayed the latest data. "The alien forces have retreated beyond sensor range. It appears they're regrouping." Vance grimaced, staring at the tactical display. "That's what I was afraid of. They're not done yet. They're planning something bigger." His eyes flicked to the holographic projection of the battlefield, analyzing the enemy's movements with a scrutinizing gaze. They wouldn't retreat unless they had a strategy, something far more dangerous than the brute force they had just thrown at Earth. "We don't have the luxury of waiting for their next move. We have to prepare," Vance said, more to himself than to the rest of the command staff. "Get our engineers on full repair protocols. And contact Central Command. We'll need reinforcements." "They'll take time to arrive, Commander," Arya reminded him gently. "We're still isolated from the nearest fleet base." "I know," Vance replied, tension tightening his voice. "But we don't have any other choice. If they hit us again without full strength, we're finished." Suddenly, a faint chime echoed through the control room, followed by the unmistakable sound of a secure transmission coming through the comms network. Arya tapped the receiver, bringing up the encrypted message. Her brow furrowed as she read it. "Commander, we're receiving a high-priority message from the captured alien ship in Sector 12, she said, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. "It's from the prisoners. They're requesting a parley." Vance's eyes narrowed. "Prisoners from the alien ship? What do they want?" "They claim to have vital information regarding the next phase of the invasion," Arya replied, her voice carrying a note of hesitation. "But they'll only speak to you." Vance leaned back in his chair, considering the weight of the request. The alien prisoners had been completely silent since their capture, refusing all attempts at interrogation. Now they wanted to talk? "What's your take?" Vance asked, glancing over at his intelligence officer, Commander Bale, who had been quietly observing the exchange. Bale, a calculating man with a history of uncovering enemy plots, met Vance's gaze evenly. "It could be a ploy to gain leverage. They've been quiet for a reason, Commander. Now, with their fleet in retreat, they might be trying to manipulate us into lowering our defenses." But if they have intel on the next attack, we can't afford to ignore it, Vance countered. His instincts were at war. Every part of him screamed caution, but he also knew that the enemy's next strike could be devastating without forewarning. After a pause, Bale nodded. If you go, take security measures. We can set up a localized EMP pulse within the room. If things turn hostile, it will knock out any electronics they could use to escape. Vance stood up from his command chair, his decision made. Do it. Prepare an interrogation room and bring them in. Let's hear what they have to say. The air in the room shifted. Everyone knew this was a dangerous move. The alien prisoners were a wild card, their motives and methods still a mystery. But in a war where the stakes were survival, Vance wasn't about to leave any stone unturned. Minutes later, Vance entered the sterile, dimly lit interrogation chamber. In the center of the room stood two towering alien figures, their once imposing presence diminished by the shackles binding their limbs. They were humanoid in shape but distinctly foreign, with gray, mottled skin, elongated limbs, and eyes that glowed faintly with an eerie light. Their expressions were unreadable, alien features twisted into a permanent state of contempt. One of the prisoners, seemingly the leader, inclined its head ever so slightly as Vance approached. Its voice, when it spoke, was a low hiss, translated automatically through the universal comms system. Commander Vance? The alien drawled, its tone sharp, as though the very words tasted of venom. You are more resilient than we anticipated. Get to the point, Vance replied coldly, folding his arms. What do you know about the next attack? The alien's lip curled in what might have been a smile, though it only added to the unsettling aura it exuded. Your victory was unexpected. But you are gravely mistaken if you think you have won. The room tensed as the alien continued. Your planet is not their target, Commander. It is simply a distraction. Vance's eyes narrowed. A distraction for what? The alien's glowing eyes burned with a flicker of something, glee, perhaps, before it spoke again. The true target is your son. The words sent a jolt of ice through Vance's veins. What are you talking about? Their plan is simple, the alien said, its voice dripping with malice. While you've been distracted defending your home, the real strike team has been preparing to destabilize your star. They mean to extinguish it, Commander. And when they succeed, your world will be nothing but a frozen tomb. Vance felt the weight of the revelation settle like a boulder on his chest. He had anticipated an invasion, battles fought ship to ship, but this? The extinction of their sun would be annihilation on an unimaginable scale. They wouldn't just lose the war, Earth would be erased from existence. Why tell me this now? Vance demanded, suspicion creeping into his voice. The alien leaned forward as much as its restraints allowed, eyes glowing with cold, twisted amusement. Because you cannot stop them. And now, you will watch your world die. Vance's blood ran cold. There wasn't a second to waste. Arya! He barked into his comms, already turning to leave the room. Prepare the fleet. We have to move now.